Welcome to Perusing's Appraisers on Purpose podcast. Our podcast showcases inspiring appraisers and professionals from the industry who are leaders in their field. How did they get to where they are? What have they learned along the way? What can we learn from them? Your host is real estate investor, entrepreneur, and appraiser, Michael Hobbs.
Well, welcome to another exciting, informative, and engaging episode of Perusing's Appraisers on Purpose podcast, as it continues to be one of the fastest growing podcasts because people just love hearing the stories of peers and gaining insights into what's possible for themselves and their futures. As well as for some people, it's also a look back on, oh yeah, I've had that experience as well. Today shall be no different in terms of significant enlightenment. But before we get there, of course, for those of you that are already subscribing, thank you so much for doing so. For those of you, if you haven't, please make sure to click on that subscribe button. Your small action makes a huge difference. Continues to bring this out to more and more individuals, both in the profession and beyond the profession, for stories from the field, if you will. And with that, I am so excited to have Joshua Wood with us. Josh, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, Michael. It's a pleasure to be here. And I'd like to say I really appreciate what you're doing for the profession with this podcast. So it's an honor to be part of that as well.
Well, I appreciate it. Thanks. It's a small way I can contribute to what was missing when I came into the profession 25 years ago. So hoping to make a little dent in the world. Speaking of little dents in the world, at what point, if we look back, that, inquiring minds want to know, so were you born this way, or how did you come to find the valuation and appraisal profession?
Well, Michael, I'll answer that question two ways. The first, was appraisal an accident? Yeah, it was a total accident. Why am I still here after 25 years?
Yep.
And it's because the valuation profession has been able to come meet me where I am. A certain way, I do feel like I was born this way. Didn't really know what appraisal even was.
Mm-hmm. Love that. So for you, did you start negotiating your values back when you were just a kid, or how did that go for you?
When I was a kid, I thought I was going to be a professor.
Oh, okay.
I grew up in Princeton, New Jersey.
Got it.
I grew up in a company town, and the business of that company town was academics. My grandfather was a professor at the university. My dad was an alum.
Wow.
The church we went to was on the campus, basically.
Oh, goodness.
And these were the people I went to school with, to high school with. I dated a girl whose dad was a Nobel Prize winner. This was the world I grew up in. And I thought I would be a professor. I got into a PhD program and thought, okay, my life is set. All I got to do is follow the rules and I'll get my PhD and I will get to be a professor. And Michael, I hated it.
I totally respect that.
I hated it. And it was devastating because I thought that's what I was supposed to do. In fact, it took me 2 years to quit, even though I knew within a few months that I hated it because it was so hard to quit what I thought was my life's goal.
Oh, no.
Dream. That was at Rutgers. I did meet the girl at Rutgers and followed her to Arizona. She wanted to do a program in American Indian Studies in Arizona. And my world had exploded, and I figured I might as well have an exploded world in Arizona as have one in New Jersey. So we together drove across country in an old station wagon that didn't have air conditioning. Graduate students can't afford air conditioning in New Jersey. And she started her program, and I looked for a job. And Tucson, Arizona is not an easy place to start finding a job when you don't have any particular background. You're just a liberal arts graduate.
Wow.
And I ended up having two options. And one was working at the car rental desk at the airport. And the other was working for a guy that did something called appraisals.
Wow. So you still love the rental cars?
Yeah, I came in. This guy had one person who worked for him, and she had just given notice when my desperate fax had slipped out of his fax machine.
Oh my gosh, you're bringing back some beautiful memories. I can almost smell that fax paper right now.
And so I went in and I sat at her elbow for 2 weeks, and then she left. And then it was just me and him.
Wow.
And every assignment was go look in the file cabinet and find something like what we're doing now, and then make that happen.
Oh, that's amazing. So talk to me. I love that you said that the car rental desk opportunity, or coming in as a appraisal associate, if you will, because of the facts. I think maybe you have discovered what young people are missing these days. I mean, could they replicate your success?
What do you mean?
Using a fax machine.
Oh, the fax machine. That's right. Yeah, well, actually, it was the machine that I used to send that out was the very first iMac, that Rev A iMac. And the brand new feature it had was when you went to the printer menu, you could pick fax machine. So
impressive.
I just typed up a generic cover letter and then put in every fax number I could find in the white pages in the newspaper. And
love it.
Michelle and I went out to the movies, and that little iMac shot my fax machine all over Tucson, Arizona.
Yeah, I love the resourcefulness, Josh. That I just love stories like that. Now, unfortunately, I'm going to have to ask a tough question, and that is, what are white pages? We do have some listeners that have no idea what you just explained.
Yeah, phone numbers of businesses in the phone book.
And the phone book is what?
A physical document that had numbers you could type in that ring phone numbers of people who ran business.
Yeah, it was quite the experience. It was always exciting when you got that new version that showed up. Use the old one as a doorstop now. So you actually had some people reply, you get this opportunity, and you got, sounds like an amazing 2 whole weeks of training.
That's right. Yeah. It was but the file cabinet was full of appraisals, and a lot of the training was self trading, just to read the appraisals and see what was going on in there. The other part what hooked me there was discovering that appraisal had this body of knowledge, textbooks and courses. So as I said, I was coming out of the graduate school world. I was raised in the academic world. Mm-hmm. This was very familiar to me. And so
got it.
I grabbed a copy of that, whatever it was, the 11th edition, maybe at that point,
who knows,
and marked it up like a graduate student would with my pencil. And I think every page had circles and lines and arguments and, exclamation points.
Got it.
I took it home and I read it on my own. Not because it was assigned, but that was my method of dealing with this job. And that started my love affair with the valuation profession.
Amazing. That is quite stimulating start to the profession. I can think of no one actually that's ever said that they just marked it up with all kinds of notes and arguments in the margins. It just wasn't happening that way.
Right. Yeah. Throughout my career, I have struggled to find anybody who's taken the path that I've taken.
That is impressive. That's impressive. And I guess even more impressive to the phone book is, do you still have that original edition?
I don't.
No, you have lost the seminal.
It's somewhere along the line. Yeah. And it breaks my heart that's gone. Honestly, I don't think I owned it. But it didn't belong to me. It's probably still
my God,
in the office somewhere.
I love that. Wow. So you truly did, which I actually very much appreciate, learn valuation from the ground up as it is, I would say, distilled from on high in the form of the textbook, but not carved into tablets.
Yeah, I had the textbook, and then I had the assignments that came our way, and it was the other part that kept me there. Besides the familiar part of the academic work was the nosiness, the way you got to just see past the curtain, into the details of what made stuff run. I hadn't thought hard about how do shopping centers work, or how do office buildings work? Got it. How do people decide I'm going to build a neighborhood or not? Yeah. And it was amazing to see how much information was disclosed to appraisers.
Yes.
Okay, here's all our operating data. Here's all our cost data. And so this became exciting. And next thing you know, you appraise for just a little while, and now you can't look at property the same way, right? You look at stuff, you drive down the street, and you're quantifying it, and you're proving it, and you're imagining it. I remember sitting with my father-in-law out in front of a motel while we were waiting for something else to go on, and I said, you know what? Just seeing their price up there, I can start to talk to you about, what some reasonable parameters of value would be for that. Just from this one thing. He was excited about that. It's not like I can give you the precise value, but we can start talking about that. We can set the background for it.
Yes.
The priors, as you might say.
That's phenomenal. So for those that haven't had the opportunity, might even use the word privilege. Otherwise, we might say the persistence to take on any type of graduate school work, much less a PhD. And you said it took you 2 years to quit what you figured out in 2 weeks or 2 months. What did you learn in that process that has really worked for you, being in and around the valuation and appraisal profession?
What did I learn in graduate school?
Yeah, because most people have never had that experience, and clearly you started down that road. Yeah.
Well, graduate school was about intensive study, and it was also about teaching. So it's the two things together. Graduate students teach, and they do that more and more and more nowadays. As anybody who's gone to a big university knows, often your classes are being taught by graduate students.
Yes.
But it's also to take a deep dive into a world of people who are similarly dedicated to something, like you said. There is a lot that's very familiar in the Appraisal Institute world. To be an MAI in some level is to take this deep dive commitment, and then you surround yourselves with other MAIs who proceed that line. Certainly, one of the big things that comes in any environment is the jargon. So graduate students in any field have the jargon, and we have our jargon. And jargon is one of our biggest limitations in the way we interact, whether it's with ordinary clients or especially in testimony scenarios.
Got it. Fascinating. So here you are, an esteemed liberal arts graduate in Tucson, Arizona. So how were those first assignments? I mean, because I got to imagine they might be a little more difficult. You can't just look in the file cabinet to actually go deal with the physicality of being on site with a property. How was that whole experience?
Well, it was, what's the expression? Drinking from the fire hose, right? We were the firm that just took whatever came in. So you didn't get to do the same thing over and over and over again. It was fascinating to get a picture of the different ways that different properties are valued. I started taking the classes around that time. This is before internet classes. So I was flying around the country to take these classes. Well, I could drive to the ones in California, but I flew back to New Jersey to take some where I could stay at my parents'. I think in some ways it's too bad that so many classes are done online today, because I got to meet a lot of different people doing that stuff.
Totally agree.
I went to Denver for the cost approach and got it from Nelson Bowes, and that was an amazing experience. It changed my perspective on the cost approach.
Oh, yeah.
While I was on ranching. And in the East Coast, I got to learn some of the advanced MAI classes from Manhattan appraisers who had wonderful stories about highest and best use transformations over 120 years, about the same lot in Manhattan that turned from a slaughterhouse to an office building to an apartment, and the perspective that you get on it.
That's amazing.
I took a class with the Manhattan appraisers right around just after September 11th of 2001.
Wow.
We ended up talking about
Jeez.
What happens? What do you do with that site?
Yeah.
Following what's going on. So this was a very exciting period in my life because I felt like there was always something new to do. And then, of course, you cap that off with the demonstration appraisal report.
Mm-hmm.
And then, again, at that time, there was no capstone. There was no, fill in the blanks kind of thing. Mm-hmm. It was go do it on your own.
Wow.
And that, I loved that challenge because it gave me the opportunity to create an appraisal from scratch.
Mm-hmm.
What would it look like if I did it my way from the very beginning? And doing it my way is important to me, Michael. So,
boy, I've never heard someone in the valuation profession say that. That is shocking to me.
And it completely changed my life to do that. Changed who I was as an appraiser to create that work. But then I said to my mentors, what do I do now? And they said, well, what do you mean? You got your MAI. Now you just appraise property for 40 years. And I was like, no, not me. And that's when I started law school.
Of course, because that's what everybody does.
I was in Tucson, Arizona, and the University of Arizona had an amazing law school, and it was public tuition.
Oh, that's good.
And it was fascinating. So that was the next, at that point, Michael, I thought I was going to leave appraisal and become the attorney who knew about appraisal.
Oh, okay.
That was my plan at the time.
Yeah. Got that.
It was kind of like appraisal all over again, that appraisal experience, that the opening up every different law school class was another, how does this work?
Yeah, very much so.
And in our society, at least, it's the lawyers at the end of the day who say how things work.
Mm-hmm.
So it was fascinating to do contract law, to do tort law, to just have these books that said, hey, you ever wondered how this works? You ever wonder how negligence works? Or you ever wonder what consideration is? And they were in these books. It was like the experience as a kid. You play a board game, and
mm-hmm.
some people just slap the stuff down and start rolling the dice. And there's always one guy who turns over the back of the box and reads what's on there, and that was me. And that is me. And that was what I did through law school. It's what law school felt like, was reading the back of the box for all sorts of parts of how the world works.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, there was property. And that was amazing. It continues to be amazing. Property law is, every time you think you've got it figured out, it turns out to be a little bit more complicated than you thought it was. It was especially shocking to discover how different the law and the appraisal world treated certain property concepts. I literally fell out of my chair when we talked about fee simple in class, because I was leaning back thinking, if there's anything that I'm ready for here in law school, it's fee simple, because we talk about fee simple all the time.
All the time.
And wow, was it surprising to see how differently the law treated it.
Phenomenal. So, did you pass the class?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, and I signed up for more property law stuff as well. Zoning, land use, public lands, and mining. Endlessly fascinating stuff.
The market right now is tough for appraisal companies. Many companies are having a hard time getting enough work with the same marketing they used to. Is your company struggling, having a hard time getting new customers, or getting additional work from existing customers? The answer to this problem is easier than you think. Do more business with the people you already know. Over 10 years, the average U.S. appraisal firm meets over 17,000 potential customers. That's a lot of people you could be doing business with right now. But it's a big problem if you don't have a proven process to communicate with them. StoryLux turns this problem into an opportunity to grow. Our advanced AI marketing tool can rebuild your contact lists and harvest long-forgotten communications. Imagine reaching out to everyone you've ever met with just one click. For the cost of 1 or 2 appraisals a month, StoryLux helps you reconnect and market to people who already know you, like you, trust you, and want to do business with you. Act now by contacting StoryLux today to turn your business growth dreams into reality. Email appraisal@storylux.com. That is appraisal@storylux.com. And now back to part 2 of the episode.
That is phenomenal. And I didn't know if you mentioned it or not. I apologize if I missed it. Were you going full-time or were you doing the night program?
Yeah, I was going full-time and I was writing appraisals, and my second child was born.
Okay.
In those days. So yeah, there was not much sleep for me between 2004 and 2007.
Does not sound that way. Definitely doesn't sound that way. But I mean, isn't that the joy of being younger and caffeinated?
It was thrilling. Like this was what I wanted to do, and I would earn money during the day. I would go to the classes for that enlightenment. I would spend the family time. I would put everybody to sleep, and I would get on the chair and open up my law books and read legal opinions.
Yeah, I thought you were going to say you were going to put everybody to sleep reading them the law book. That's why I thought you were going with that one for a minute.
yeah. There's that. That's certainly a benefit as well.
Got it. So you make it successfully through law school. You become an attorney in Arizona. Is that the way the path goes?
Yep.
And what happens next?
Well, I tried to look for a job, but...
And what year was that, to kind of help frame that up? Because that has a huge factor on the employment market, and the economy has a huge factor on legal employment.
That was 2007. That was not a great fund work. And I was not your typical law school graduate. So I was 33 years old with 2 children, and the expectation that I should be paid for my knowledge and not just my time. But my competition were mostly 25-year-olds who didn't have any particular experience in anything. And
yes.
Were willing to trade big chunks of time for money.
Got it.
And it was not, and Tucson is a tough place to find a legal job. The U of A was turning out maybe 100 JDs a year.
Oh, really?
And the community of Tucson needed maybe 1 per year.
Wow.
So if you were willing to travel, there were many opportunities, but my family was pretty firmly planted there at the time.
Yes.
And I considered briefly whether I should try to do both, sort of put out my shingle and be an appraiser and an attorney. But it didn't take me very long to realize that was a terrible idea.
Oh, I see.
Attorneys are secret keepers and appraisers are not. And the two professions really don't work well together. You cannot both be an advocate and a neutral. And you can't even really easily, in this scenario, switch back and forth, because suppose you had a legal client who owned property at one corner of an intersection and an appraisal client who owned property at the other corner. The legal client requires you to hold all the secrets, and the appraisal client requires you to say everything you know what's going on.
Yeah.
Too much of a challenge, however. This is what opened up the whole idea to me of the neutral. And what are the ways to explore being a neutral in the law? And that's what led me to joining the American Arbitration Association and doing work as an arbitrator.
And most people are probably not familiar with the American Arbitration Association. You want to tell them a little bit about it? Because it is a fascinating place in the spirit of contentious matters, mostly contentious, not always contentious, and a growing presence as well.
Yeah. Well, arbitration is one of the leading alternative sources of dispute resolution. alternative to suing and going to court.
Yes.
You'll only find yourself in arbitration if you've made an agreement to be in arbitration. Arbitration means you've agreed to settle your dispute outside of the courts. And there's all sorts of wonderful things about arbitration, which has been around for quite some time. And the federal law that, let's say, supports and boosts arbitration was from the early part of the 20th century. So it's something that the law has encouraged for some time. There's a number of benefits for it. It's supposed to be faster and more efficient, so it ought to save money.
Yes.
It is private rather than public, so court documents are public.
Yes.
And one of the biggest benefits of it is you can pick who your arbitrator is. So you choose in your arbitration to have an arbitrator who's an expert in a particular field to do the arbitrating.
Yes.
Another way that you can save time and then hopefully also get the opinion of someone who is already educated and familiar with the area. So for commercial real estate value disputes, why not have a commercial real estate appraiser be the one that hears the evidence and makes the decisions?
Yeah, that's a great point. For those that know that you exist, and that's, I assume, one of the interesting early challenges you might have dealt with is awareness.
That's right. Yeah. And continue to. It's not an easy field to get noticed in, but it's, in fact, the American Arbitration Association itself told me that, we don't have any need for you for a few years.
Thank you so much. Can I tell you how much property makes up for our national GDP? Can we have a little conversation? I don't care if we want to talk residential or commercial. And I'm not talking billions, friends. I'm talking tens of trillions. But no, please tell me that there's no place for this.
Yeah, they said, we don't really need anybody with your skill set. And I said, that's fine. Just hold on to my stuff until you do. And they said, yeah, well, we won't. And then next thing you know, I got a call from Michael, I think it's all part of just having to be patient.
Yeah.
I have, in my career, I've tried to move along the lines that made the most sense to me, and often they didn't work out. In fact, I look at a lot of things I did and I see failures. I thought I was going to become a professor and I failed at that. Yeah. So actually, the first way I made money before even starting graduate school was singing opera. And I thought for a while that a performing career was something that I wanted to do. And I tried.
You absolutely could. You might be poor most of your life, but you could totally do that. Well, only speaking from the firsthand experience of a friend who is still very talented and still can't support himself just on vocal chops.
There's that. There was also getting the upfront exposure to people who were far, far more talented and realizing I'm not going to be anywhere near as good as that person, as much as I love doing what I'm doing. But as I said at the beginning, answering your question in two ways.
Yeah.
What's fascinating about the valuation profession, as many times as I've started to walk away from it, as I've told it, it's not you, it's me. The valuation profession has changed and offered me places to take advantage of these things I'm talking. So I'm not a professor, but I'm an instructor and a course developer and a contributor to the 15th edition. And I write articles for Valuation Magazine. And I get to do a lot of that scholarship that I was training for.
Yeah. But I get that.
And in the performance, I'm a presenter. I'm an expert witness, so I testify.
Yeah.
And the avenues for performance are there for me as well. And these are just mine. These are the things that I want out of a profession. But I look around me and I see people doing valuation in all these different ways.
Yes.
ways I wouldn't want to do.
Yes.
My son to me said at one point, I don't want an office job. And I said, I don't want one either. I don't think of what I have as an office job.
Yes.
Because I do everything I can to spend time out of the office. But there's lots of people who have a valuation profession that is in office, and that's where they're comfortable, and that's what they want to do. So earlier when I said, was I born this way?
Mm-hmm.
I feel so fortunate to have found a profession that has come to me on my terms.
Yes. How has that from those days of law school and sorting out, as you astutely phrased it, that the attorneys are secret keepers and appraisers are not? How did your valuation career move through those years from then until, say now, for instance?
I was in Arizona for 16 years. And at the end of my time in Arizona, because of the years I built up, because of the relationships I built up, and certainly because of the training that I developed, I got to do more and more expert witness work. In that time, property tax appeal was quite active in Arizona.
Oh.
The law has changed, and property tax is not nearly as big a business line for appraisers as it once was.
I see.
But at that time, it was pretty big, and I started to do quite a bit of property tax appeal work in Arizona.
Okay.
Then about 10 years ago, I had an opportunity to transition from Arizona to Valbridge and joined the Houston office of Valbridge.
Oh, okay.
And that was a tremendous transition in my life in a number of ways. So many people know that Texas is non-disclosure, and Arizona is maybe the most open disclosure state that exists, because Arizona does what they call affidavits of value that get filed in the record.
Wow.
The deed, and the affidavit of value has, half of your sale verification contained within.
Amazing.
So I was very concerned. I wondered, do I know how to appraise, or do I just know how to appraise in Arizona? What actually is my skill set?
Mm-hmm.
What is this going to be like moving into an environment where everything is a secret?
Yes.
Also, there was the size of the market, and I did some work in Phoenix, but Tucson was my main market, and Tucson had 1 million people. And I was moving to Texas, moving to Houston, which is an enormous city. But then not only is there Houston here in Texas, but there's Dallas, and there's San Antonio, and there's Austin.
Mm-hmm.
And I haven't even mentioned places like El Paso yet, which would be, bigger than many cities in many states.
Yes.
So, here's a picture of the difference, Michael. In Tucson, the commercial appraisers in Tucson basically knew every sale.
No kidding.
If an apartment sells, everybody gets it. Everybody puts it in the grid. You don't have to have an apartment assignment ready to go yet. It's just that small and that slow.
That's amazing.
You just read CoStar like the morning news, right? It's that's the size of it. And,
oh my goodness.
And so working in Texas, working in Chicago, working in major markets, obviously it's nothing like it.
Yeah.
But this was also an enormous transition for me, because I was used to feeling like being a good appraiser meant I already know everything.
Yes.
I'm watching it before it happens. And when you come to me and say, appraise this, I'm saying, I've already got all the comps. And one of the things that meant, was I spent a lot of time on adjustments and thinking hard about how to make the adjustments as good as possible. Because when you don't have to spend the time chasing down the sales, you've got the time to.
Yeah, that's great.
So this was about as big of a transition, I think, as you can get in the appraisal world, going from Tucson, Arizona to Houston, Texas, and beyond.
Wow.
That was 10 years ago. And the other real opportunity that I got in going to Texas was that I got to work for a larger company with people who had established names, big established relationships. And so the different business lines that were available were
I see.
manifold. And I got to see a number of property types and business lines that I hadn't been exposed to in the smaller firm.
Got it. That's fascinating. So for those that don't know, Houston has a pretty sizable property tax presence from a valuation standpoint. Did you go back into that kind of work?
Yeah,
or did you?
Yeah, all of property tax is a big deal through all of Texas. People tend to think that, Texas must be red state. There's no income tax. So, quite contrary. Texas might be the biggest property tax market in the country. Property taxes are relatively high, and the property tax code almost looks like it was developed to generate property tax fights. So there's quite a bit to be done on property tax in Texas.
Yes.
I spent a fair amount of time doing that, but it's certainly not the only thing I'm interested in doing.
Yes.
As I said before, I wouldn't move to Texas and then say, well, now, for 30 years, you just do property tax.
Yes.
So that's not the path I want to go. But clearly there is a lot of property tax work to be done in Texas. And I intend to keep doing that for sure.
Yeah, no, that's quite the experience. Again, for those that are in Texas, they have a full understanding of it. But for everybody else, it is, it's quite unfamiliar to them. And therefore, when you look at Harris County, which, Houston's located in, being the third largest county in the United States, second only to Cook County and LA County. I mean, it's pretty phenomenal. And you were over there in Arizona, so you've got the fourth largest county over there. And then pretty much after the fifth largest county, like everything else falls off really quickly in terms of parcel count.
That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Texas is a fascinating place to be. That public lands class I took in law school, in that class, we learned for any rule, there was the East Coast rule and the West Coast rule and the Texas.
Oh, I didn't know. See, I'd never gone to law school. I did not know that.
Texas is unique in so many ways. The surveys, you can have a legal description in Texas in ways that other states wouldn't accept. You got the private surveys.
Yep.
You got the government, grid surveys in some parts, and then you are also in Texas, you're able to cite a legal description to just some other document and point to some other thing to look at. And they'll accept it in Texas.
Holy smokes.
It really is. It's another country here.
Mm-hmm.
It's a fascinating place to work.
It really is. So in the 10 years that you've been in Houston, what have you what has been the experience that you didn't expect you were going to get, but because you're there and it's primarily where you practice, that you most appreciate?
What's really fascinating about living and working in Texas is they call it the Texas Triangle. So if you can picture the four major metros, mm-hmm. Houston, Dallas, Austin, San Antonio, you can actually draw a line straight through them that would form a triangle. These communities are capturing some ridiculous amount of growth, but they're also fascinatingly diverse economically.
Yes.
Houston is very grassroots. Houston is very makes stuff,
Yes.
Storing pipelines, like storing pipes ready to be inked, is a major use of land.
Mm-hmm.
And the interstates are built so that the interstate is on top and the crossing streets are below, because nobody knows how big the trucks are. They're going to have to go down the interstate. So, there's no 20-foot limit. The interstates are, sky's the limit for what goes down. And
Got it.
Commuting into work, get to see all sorts of fascinating machinery and wonder, what in the world does that thing do?
Oh, wow.
So Houston is wonderfully grassroots. Houston has a rodeo just like Tucson had a rodeo. That was very familiar to us. Houston is still very much connected to those parts of the economy.
Got it.
Whereas Dallas, to me, reminds me very much of the East Coast. I think of Dallas as a colony of the East Coast with its banking-centered economy. You got San Antonio with the military and the recreation, tourism and conventions, and Austin with tech and the university. It's that little triangle itself.
Mm-hmm.
Is remarkably diversified. The other stuff that when you come to Texas, you will get amazed by is how much real estate is underground. Everybody's got real estate underground, but in Texas, it's being traded all the time and has to be valued all the time. So the pipelines, you look at a pipeline map, it's remarkable. All these pipes shooting back and forth through Texas.
And for many people, they heard that and didn't even register, because the idea of subsurface real estate is just not on their radar screen.
That's right. And so you can have a fascinating appraisal assignment of, okay, there's an existing pipeline and we want to run another pipeline below that pipeline. So what's the fractional portion of the fee interest that accrues to that part that you want to talk about?
And at that point, you just lost most of the people listening.
Jargon, right?
Oh, that is wild. Yeah, it goes back to I should know better because I've taught the classes. The basic concepts. I couldn't remember if it was in principles or procedures, but I'm pretty sure it's in principles. That the notion of ownership goes down to the core of the earth, extends all the way out to the far reaches of the sky until the FAA cuts you off, that kind of thing. And clearly in Texas, subsurface rights are amazingly
they're worth fighting over.
Yeah, valuable and complex.
They're worth fighting over.
Yeah, absolutely the case there. Absolutely the case there. So, I mean, Josh, you've had such an interesting career, and as you've touched on, you did not want to get stuck 40 years behind a desk upon getting some letters after your name. As you look out over the next 3 to 5 years, what are you most excited about or looking forward to?
Well, I'm really fascinated to see what happens as artificial intelligence becomes a bigger part of what we do.
Yes.
That's actually something I worked on way back when, in my philosophy career as an undergraduate and then as a graduate student, was cognitive science and artificial intelligence. And it's funny to see it coming up now again, after it was, had been this big focus of my life, what feels like a lifetime ago. I think it's going to be transformative, and I'm excited for the abilities that we're going to have with it to see how it's going to change our profession. Many people are concerned our profession will go away, and I don't believe that's going to happen. And I just sent an article into Valuation making that point directly. So with any luck, within a month or two, you'll be able to get a look at that in the magazine. But I think it's going to be a valuable tool for us, certainly to transform the way we do what we do. I love the idea of what we can do with big data. I think it's all just going to help us get back to what remain big questions. Mm-hmm. What is a comp? And what is the right adjustment to that comp? These remain the fundamental questions of our profession, but I feel like we're going to be able to answer them so much better. Like, if we have big sets of data, what ends up being comparable could transform significantly. So if I'm going to try to appraise something on 6th Street in Austin, the big university hangout, are my best comps going to be 5th Street in Austin and 4th Street in Austin? Or are my best comps going to be like Franklin Street in Chapel Hill?
Good point.
The possibilities that we, I think, may be able to get to as we start to gather larger sets of data and turn loose computing power on them, I think are going to reveal to us appraisers fascinating connections that we never had the ability to actually evaluate before.
I couldn't agree with you more so, and it's in a healthy way, but also a challenging way. It's for those that are familiar with modeling and rendering capabilities. You look at what that's done for an advancement in the respective fields compared to what was previously done in 2 dimension with, graph paper and pencil. And suddenly you're doing computational analysis that was never before even thought possible, but because of technology, it makes it present and available. And then you look at the results that can come forth from it. So fascinating perspective.
Yeah. And I don't think it needs to change us. In fact, I think it can reinforce what we really are at bottom, which is about, like I said, those fundamentals. What's a comp? What's the right adjustment? And what's really credible? What's really supportable and believable?
Yes.
That's what we should be contributing, It's so rare and so important for our society and our economy to have the twin of expertise and impartiality. And those are really hard to find together because usually if you've developed the expertise, you're now in the system somehow. And now you've got how it comes out makes a difference to you. I think we're a noble profession, Michael. I do. And I think I'm excited for how things like AI are going to help us further that.
Yeah, definitely agree with you on that one. Wow. Well, Josh, I really appreciate the time. It has flown by, and as I knew it would be, informative, enlightening, and engaging. And I hope for some people actually inspiring. They're like, oh my goodness, I can't wait to go to law school.
Well, it's anybody, there's a million ways to be an appraiser.
That's true.
That's really what it's all about to me.
Yes. And some people would say that there are riches in niches, and choosing to go the road less traveled, while not necessarily easier, ultimately can have longer term benefits.
Can make all the difference.
And a lot of satisfaction too. Well, friends, again, thank you so much for spending your valuable time with us here today. Thanks for taking in Josh's perspective. We're excited for the upcoming bonus session. Can't imagine the wonderful topics we'll be touching on when we get to that recording. But until then, thank you for liking the podcast. Thank you for subscribing. More importantly, thank you for sharing and, of course, posting your comments and your feedback. And with that, have a fantastic day. Josh, thank you so much.
Thanks, Michael.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Perusing's Appraisers on Purpose. We hope you enjoyed learning from the amazing professional paths and achievements of our beloved guests. Before we go, please subscribe on your listening channel, Spotify, LinkedIn, YouTube, and other podcast channels to hear more from appraisers and valuers regarding their life and their work. After you drop a comment below, who is one friend and peer you can generously share this episode with? If you have any suggestions or questions for future episodes, we'd love to hear from you. Just send us a message on LinkedIn and we'll be sure to get back to you. Thanks again for listening, and until we're together again for the next session of Perusing's Appraisers on Purpose, create the change that you seek.